I'm making this jig from 3/4 inch plywood scraps, and I'm starting with the base, which is going to be 10 by 24 inches, but you can always change this to whatever size works best for you. With the base cut out, I now need a fence, which is going to be the same length, also cut out of 3/4 inch plywood. I'm ripping mine to 2 inches, but afterwards I think a 3-inch fence probably would have been better for the types of hold down clamps that I ended up going with. Next I have to add some slots for the hardware, and I'm starting with the base. My slots here are going to be 3 inches from either end, and these are just 1/4 inch slots because I'm using 1/4-20 bolts and other hardware here. So depending on the hardware you use, you may have to change the size of the slots. I want to recess the bolt head, so I'm using this 15/32 router bit to add a shallow slot in the same position as before. So for this, all you have to do is leave the fence in the exact same position, swap router bits, and then you get a perfect recess so the bolt can slide back and forth without twisting. Next for the fence, I'm also adding 1/4 inch slots. Although the clamping hardware I use actually came with larger bolts, I swapped that out for 1/4 inch bolts because that way I can just match it with whatever hardware I typically use. But for these slots, I'm adding 2 of them. Instead of one continuous slot, I wanted to maintain a little bit of extra strength on this fence, so I left the middle solid. Just like the base, I'm using the same tricks here to recess the bolt head in the fence piece. These are the types of hold down clamps I'm using, and I will have a link in the description for these, but keep in mind, like I said, I swapped out the bolt here for just a 1/4-20 bolt, and that works just fine. It's plenty strong, but just something to keep in mind. Maybe think about what type of slots you want to add here, maybe based on the router bits you have, and use that to determine what hold down clamps you want to buy. And assembly is real straightforward. As you see here, I'm just adding the bolts in and lining these up, because basically the way this works is you can adjust the fence wherever you want, lock that in place, and then you have your hold down clamps on top of that, which you can use to just, hold a piece down. And this way you can use this jig for tapering, or you can also use it kind of for joining, so you can clamp a piece on and get a straight edge. Next I'm adding a miter bar to hold the jig in place as it slides back and forth, and I suppose you could make a jig that just slides against the fence. That would work, I suppose, but the really nice thing about having a jig that slides on a miter bar is you can make a clean cut on the edge going against the blade there, and then you always have a reference point where the blade is going to cut. It makes it really easy to line up something if you're tapering some item like a table leg, where you mark off exactly where you want the cut to land. That way you don't have to do a whole bunch of math and figure out your angles. My last step here is cutting that clean edge. Like what I mentioned before, it gives you that nice reference point. So as you're lining things up for the miter bar, make sure you have enough space where you can cut off a clean edge.